Cool. Okay, let's get started. So firstly, just a very warm welcome to all of you on a very cold but sunny Melbourne day. Thank you for joining us all for today's webinar, Communicating Your COVID-Safe Recovery. We're thrilled to see so many people registering and interested for this webinar. On the screen just now is a bit of an overview of what we'll be covering today. But before we get started, I just want to cover off on some housekeeping. So today's webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing the recording with you all afterwards. We've also allowed some time at the end of today's session for a Q&A session. So if you'd like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, if you can just type it in the Q&A panel that should be at the bottom of your screen, and we'll come back and answer those at the end of the session. So now let's get started. I'd like to introduce today's speakers. So my name is Anna Butler, and I'm very pleased to introduce Claire Gleghorn and Anna Gillett as our speakers today. Claire Gleghorn is CEO of Bastion Reputation Management and has more than 15 years experience working in corporate affairs. Claire has worked on all levels of government and major infrastructure projects, publicly listed companies, including Shell, consulting firms, including the world's largest PR firm, Edelman, and the education sector, on issues in crisis, community and stakeholder engagement, employee communications, and media strategy. Anna Gillett heads up Bastion Reputation Management's risk issues and crisis practice. So needless to say, she's been a little busy over the past few months. Anna has extensive experience in corporate communications and has worked in government, the private sector with the likes of Wesfarmers and Melbourne Airport, and after experiencing a number of major crises firsthand, now specialises in mitigating and managing corporate reputation risks, issues, and crisis. So to get us started today, over to you, Claire.
Thanks very much, Anna, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited to be able to deliver this webinar today and very grateful for you taking time out of your day to join us. Bastion Reputation Management is a corporate affairs and issues and crisis management firm. We've been in operation for about 5.5 years, and we've built our business based on this very simple ethos that we trademarked several years ago because it really summed up for us what issues and crisis and corporate affairs support was all about. And that is, we help you be your best on your best day and the best you can be on your worst day. And needless to say, throughout 2020 and late 2019, many of us have experienced our worst days and have been really challenged on what it is to be the best you can be on those days. So for us today, this is really about our ability to share with you our experiences and our lessons working with a number of clients. We've worked with over a dozen clients over the last several months on COVID, going right back to when this was a travel bans issue impacting international students, right through to now with reopening, dealing with confirmed cases across a number of sectors. And we wanted to take that information, take all of that experience and help small business owners who we know are at the front line of this to really help them be able to recover and be able to get back to a COVID-safe way of operating. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more to explain about how we actually operate. We've effectively structured and set up our business to reflect what is good corporate affairs best practice. So there are 5 key parts to what we deliver across our organisation. And in many respects, small businesses tend to not necessarily be set up and structured in this way. So this is where we can come in and help support across all of the key areas from a corporate affairs point of view. So starting at the top of the wheel, business brand and positioning, that's really about helping you create a story that really defines what your values are, what you stand for, and your purpose in the market. It's really important this becomes your foundation piece. We then have a training, facilitation and capabilities arm that is really about helping you develop ways to genuinely communicate and engage with those people who matter most to you. And right now we're having to find new and different ways to be able to deliver that message. And it's really important for small business owners and small business, small enterprises to be able to speak genuinely, authentically and credibly to staff, to customers, to suppliers, back into regulators as well. We then have a media strategy and content arm, which is all about helping to amplify your story. Tell that story across your own channels, but also earned channels as well, and do that in a way that actually maximizes your ability to tell your story in a way that is yours. We then have our protect area, which is risk, issues and crisis, and you'll hear a lot about that today from Anna Gillett, who heads up that practice area. That's helping you plan for, respond to, and then recover from major issues and crisis. And right now the entire world has been dealing with what it is to go through not only a health but an economic crisis as well. And last but not least, it's about parlaying all of that good work and all of that positive reputation into influential campaigns and running corporate campaigns that may be issues or policy specific, and working to build coalitions and advocacy in ways that actually engage and advance and allow you to use your reputation in positive ways. And we've seen that with so many of the business organisations, both nationally and at a state level, engaging really positively with government and trade unions and others as we move through this COVID-safe recovery. Next slide, please. So a little while ago, we decided to ask small and medium enterprises what it is that was keeping them up awake at night. And as someone who's heading up a small to medium business myself, we too have been experiencing these same things. And so it's really important that we understand and identify how best to support our clients across a range of different sectors. So we partnered with our research partner, Stable Research, within the Bastion Collective group, and asked some questions. And these were some of the key findings. So the first one there on the top left, what we found is the impact on small and medium businesses is actually far greater. You are on the front line. Small to medium business owners have been on the front line of a lot of the social distancing measures and a lot of the lockdown and regulatory and policy decision making throughout the COVID issue, and as we move into a COVID-safe recovery. You are usually, small businesses tend to have less dedicated resources and discretionary budgets to spend on things like corporate affairs and communications, and tend to focus those investments on sales and marketing resources. So being able to set up and understand how to utilise internal communications, your people and culture team, manage all of your risk, tends to be delivered by a single person. And also, notwithstanding the personal toll of actually dealing with and watching something that is so cherished and so personal as a small to medium business owner, having to go through those at a personal level and make decisions as a leader and from a business and strategy point of view is far greater impact on small and medium business owners. So many have said they would rather wait till they feel completely prepared to be able to start the reopening process. Second, in the middle there, more information. People want and need information, but it's a cluttered market. And so people are going to a mix of sources to find credible information. Those sources tend to be trusted people like accountants and sort of business advisors, but also a lot of people are starting to turn to social media. So while that's helpful in terms of finding colleagues and coalitions and people going through similar challenges, there's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of ability to drive poor decision making by referring to and being in a cloistered environment. So it's really important to find clear and credible information. And what you're going through as business owners and those people on the call who work with small business owners, your customers and your staff are actually wanting and demanding the exact same thing from you. So thinking through and empathizing with what people are demanding of you while you're demanding that information from government and other sources. Reputation remains an absolutely #1 priority and risk for businesses, and you'll hear boards talk about this all of the time. So what we found is that 30% of businesses are worried about the significant impact on their reputation throughout of the impact of COVID itself, but also throughout the recovery period where we potentially go back into lockdown or change social distancing measures. Interestingly, most people said that 70% said that they had really trusted relationships with their customers. From a reputation point of view, it's really those sort of second or third removed from you where you can potentially run into some reputational damage. So Anna will talk through with you how you can look at your stakeholders and look at them from almost like consent concentric circles. So who's closest to you, and right out there on the fringe when you're looking at the wider community and media, what can you do when you have less control as you move further away from being able to have that direct interaction with those stakeholders, and look to build trust and protect your reputation there. The biggest risk to businesses has been identified, continues to be cash flow, health, and looking at customers actually turning away from their business. This survey was in market just before the 1 June reopening and some of the easing of those lockdown restrictions. But health remains a really critical part of the equation, and it's important to know that the reason we're starting to move into recovery mode is because we got a handle on the health and safety issues, and that needs to continue to be a key part of messaging going through, and Anna will talk you through that in a little while. Responding to the outbreak, many feel prepared. The reality is no one will ever be 100% prepared, but there's a lot that you can do to set yourself up and build the tools that allow you to feel confident that you can deal with the uncertainty ahead, because there is a lot of uncertainty. So 20% of businesses have said that they would actually rather hold back and have more time to get prepared. And so what we're here to do today is to provide some of those tips and tools to give you that level of confidence and reassurance that you can move forward, even though we don't necessarily know what's coming in the near future. And lastly, this is really about keeping people safe. So 20%, nearly 20% of people who we spoke to, small business owners, said they were concerned about their ability to actually genuinely keep people safe. And what's important here is not just the physical safety, but also that sense of safety and well-being, and allowing customers and staff to raise anxieties and concerns. And Anna will go into more detail about that in a little while as well. Next slide, over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Claire. So now we've been through what the survey results are and what it means for you as SMEs. I'm going to take you through some ways that can help communicate your COVID-safe recovery. Three areas I'll be covering are principles of communicating in this COVID era, your stakeholders, and your communications materials, so specifically around the content and the distribution. And then we're going to wrap all of that up into some top 5 tips for you. So first of all, let's look at some communications principles. And these are aimed at helping to protect and strengthen your reputation. What do we actually mean by communications principles? Well, for us, they are the essentials of communicating in this COVID era. As we've said, we've worked with a number of clients over the past few months, specifically on COVID-related work, and our experience combined with our observations of how government and also other businesses are managing the situation, we think these 5 principles should form the basis of all of your communications at the moment. Now, some of these may sound fairly logical, and in some ways they are, but they are also a foundation for you to check everything against and come back to. So as you can see, the first principle we have there is to align with and refer to government restrictions and health advice. The main message from government has been that all of its decisions have been based on expert health advice, and they've been pretty consistent and quite compelling. Enough so that for the most part, everyone in Australia retreated to our homes and stayed there for 6+ weeks. As I said, quite compelling. It's proven to be effective, and unless you are a health expert yourself, we'd recommend you also align with this advice from your communications and your operations. As we know, emerging from COVID isolation is going to look really different for different states, different businesses and different industries. So using and referring to that official government advice will make sure that you are most up to date and have that latest information, which is what you need as things continue to change. On that point, there are a lot of really great government resources out there, so please use them. Feel free to use them and refer your customers and your staff to those resources to make sure they have a source of information as well. But that doesn't mean you just get to rely on government resources. You need to have your own plans in place. For example, if you have a staff member who contracts COVID, what happens then? You need to have a plan to support the health department in that contact tracing, and you'll need to know how you want to notify staff, how you potentially need to close business buildings, as well as undertake additional cleaning, and also obviously the wider business continuity plans and communications to your customers. So as I said, align with and refer to government restrictions. Our second principle is to be proactive in your communications. So that means you need to be on the front foot out there communicating. even, as Claire referred to, when you don't have all the answers. By being proactive, you'll be seen to be leading and show your staff and stakeholders that you are responsive, that you can keep them informed, and you are a source of information and a credible truth when it comes to your businesses. By being proactive, it'll help to strengthen and build your reputation and people's trust in your business. It also provides another foundation to build on it as things progress and as the situations change. Particularly in terms of establishing a regular drumbeat of communications. You need to keep communicating. You can't just do it once. In times of uncertainty, people want information. We all want it. We've all felt it. And if you don't feel that vacuum with information about your own business, other people will do it for you, which is obviously not the best thing for you. So you need to be the source of credible truth for your staff, for your customers, and for the rest of your stakeholders. And again, that will help to build their trust and confidence. Being proactive also means actively managing all of your channels, including social media, which I'll come back to in a sec. The third principle, and Claire's alluded to this, is actually acknowledging the concerns and uncertainty of people in this situation. I bet if someone said to you on New Year's Eve, oh, there's this new virus and it's going to see us all pretty much confined to our houses for a few months and we'll be panic buying toilet paper, I'm sure you would have laughed, and quite loudly. The world as we know it has changed, excuse me, and we don't really know what that new world actually looks like either. For many people, change and uncertainty are really hard. So it's important to acknowledge that there's been a hell of a lot of change. It's been huge. And that some people are really concerned, and that's okay. And that people will be anxious, and that's okay too. We are first and foremost humans, so we need to be empathetic and assure people that we understand their concerns and that we're being guided by expert advice. When acknowledging these concerns, particularly as small business owners, and as Claire has said, it also means acknowledging your own concerns, as you need to make sure that your anxieties aren't actually clouding your decision making and your responses and interactions with staff and other stakeholders. So moving to our fourth principle, as you can see, it's called being open, honest, and transparent. While we always advocate that you are open, honest, and transparent in your communications, it's really particularly important when you're communicating changes for your organisation, even if they're hard ones like staff stand downs and layoffs. Being honest and open won't necessarily make those conversations easier for you, and I apologise for that, but it is much more likely to get people to understand why you had to make certain decisions, which is really important. And for your customers, remember that if you're changing the way you operate, you'll also need to update policies and terms and conditions and the like, so that they're considered fair and reasonable in this current COVID climate. For example, staff may be looking for reassurance that we're now beginning to re-emerge from COVID isolation, that the worst is over. So we've got this, the worst is over. But with a recession now upon us, and without actually fully understanding what else COVID might bring with it, I'd hesitate against guaranteeing that, but instead reassure them that your focus remains on doing what's best for the company and for them in the long term. You need to strike that balance of reassurance while also not committing to something prematurely. The final principle is to remember to engage, not just communicate. It's likely that in the pre-COVID world, you engage with your staff, customers, partners, and stakeholders quite regularly, whether it be staff meetings, Q&A sessions, coffee catch-ups with customers or partners, or monthly meetings over lunch. I'm sure you used to hear what they had to say and decide then what to take on board and what not to take on board. You should continue to do this. Don't stop listening to or hearing or talking with your stakeholders. Social media is a particular area that I want to talk about. It was designed specifically as an engagement tool. So this is where you need to manage your engagement carefully. Today, unfortunately, social media is also where outrage will happen quickly. Now that can be as a result of something you've done or something that's been completely out of your control, but it may still happen. So it's also where reputational damage for your business is actually can easily erupt. But social media is also not the place to take that defensive reputation position and have that argument and justify your actions. Take it away from the open channel and see if you can facilitate a direct discussion with the key antagonists of the particular issue. From our experience, what we've seen in terms of businesses communicating is that we've seen some organisations so focused on getting communications out and ticking the box to say that they've communicated that they've actually stopped listening. This means that they aren't hearing their staff and customers' thoughts and concerns. Ultimately, that means that their staff and stakeholders aren't feeling heard or supported, and they're starting to lose their trust and confidence in these organisations, which makes it that much harder to come back from. So please don't stop listening to your customers. So there are our top 5 principles. As I said, align with the expert advice, be proactive, acknowledge, be open and honest, and continue to engage. So next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to move on to some things for you to consider, some other considerations that you should take into account. As you can see, the first one I wanted to talk about was stakeholders. First and foremost, you must always communicate first with those people who matter most to your business. It sounds really simple, but there are lots of loud voices coming at you at this time, and they're coming at you for information, for you to change things, for updates, and sometimes we just don't always get it right. So we'd suggest that you firstly need to identify and prioritise your stakeholders, and to do that, look at them in 3 categories. And as you can see, impact, influence, and interest. So for those who are impacted, we think these are the people who can directly impact your business or who are directly impacted by your business's actions. So this includes staff, customers or clients, partners, suppliers. For influence, these are the people who can influence your business or who are directly influenced by your business. So that means governments, regulators, and high-profile community members who could have a large influence. Interest, so these are the peoples and organisations who are interested in what you might be doing, but don't necessarily have an influence or can't necessarily impact. We put the general public and media in this category. So you obviously need to make sure that you prioritise those impacted first, and then influence, and then those who are interested. As Claire said, think of it as in sort of three spheres, the smallest one being the closest to you. It's also the most important, that's impact, followed by influence and interest. I'd like to make specific mention of the media here. While some people will say that media can influence or even directly impact on your business, and that you should always respond to media queries as quickly as possible, our experience is that media coverage will reflect the sentiment of your stakeholders. So it will show what your stakeholders are feeling about you and your business. So logically then, it's more important that you communicate with and manage your stakeholders before the media. As if you can impact how your staff, customers, partners and regulators feel about your business, then you can effectively influence how the media will report on your business. Moving on to, as it says in the slide, the content and materials. So there's 4 areas that I want to touch on here. The first one is being really clear about your purpose. What are you trying to achieve with your communication? For example, do you want to advise customers that you'll be reopening? Or do you want to build confidence in them that you're reopening your business in a really responsible way and that it's safe for them to return? Do you want them to act in a particular way based on that information? So you need to be really clear about what you're trying to achieve, because once you know that, then you can write your communications around that and develop your key messages, which again sounds really simple, but some key things to keep in mind. Know your purpose, know your facts, and what you don't know. Don't make up information if you don't know. It's okay to say, I'm really sorry I don't know that at the moment, but I'll come back to you. Make sure the information in your key messages is relevant and pertinent and adds value. You can put a whole lot of information in there, but if it's not core to your purpose and what you want to achieve, then don't put it in. And again, be understanding and empathetic. Be a human first, and the rest will come. As we've seen over the last couple of months, a lot can change and quite quickly. And as Claire alluded to, there's still a lot more change to come, particularly because we don't know what else is going to happen with that virus. So when you're developing your key messages and your communications, you need to plan for more change. And you need to keep communicating and communicating often. So make sure always reviewing your messages and your purpose and your materials, such as your talking points, your Q&As, and obviously any media responses as well, to make sure that they're current and still allow for more change to come. Remember that it's unlikely you'll ever be seen as over-communicating. I know it will feel like it, but it's unlikely to happen. One of our principles is to act to proactively communicate, and this is particularly important as the situation continues to change, which is likely, so make sure you factor it in. The last thing we wanted to suggest to everyone is that you review all of your current and planned marketing and communications. Again, sounds easy, but you need to make sure they're still appropriate. An ill-placed or an ill-timed advertisement is potentially damaging to your reputation, as it could be perceived that you're out of touch and completely tone deaf. A quick review of your planned materials will really help to mitigate this. The last thing I wanted to talk about was distributing your communications. Thank you. First and foremost, without question and without exception, your staff should always know what you are communicating first. Staff should never have to hear something about your business from a partner or read it in the paper. Staff can either be your biggest advocates or your worst detractors. And if they don't hear something from you first, it will erode their trust in you and is much more likely to make them a detractor rather than an advocate, particularly for smaller companies where employees will feel the loss of trust much more personally and much more acutely. To that end, when you're communicating with your staff, you then need to make sure that they have the appropriate resources so that they can communicate with their staff, with their partners and with their customers. So that might be a set of Q&As or some scripts to help them with a conversation, or something on the website that they can point to and is a central source of information. But you need to make sure you're arming everyone with the right information. The other thing I want to talk about was channels. You need to be able to distribute your messages on your channels. Again, sounds simple, but you need to identify the best person and the best channel to deliver the message, and then sequence it to those stakeholders who are firstly impacted, influenced, and then those who are interested. So your channels may include Facebook, Instagram, social media channels, your website, signage, or other stakeholders who will help relay your messages, and of course the media. Taking the moment to plan this out is worth it. There is a lot going on. You all have a lot going on. So things can accidentally be missed or easily fall through the cracks. Remember when the cluster of cases at Cedar Meats processing plant first became known, Cedar Meats was trying to do the right thing and inform staff, so they invited everyone to the plant for a staff information session. But they forgot the fundamentals and didn't comply with the basic social distancing measures that were expected by staff and the wider community. Again, some simple planning may have helped them to make sure that that was the right channel and done in the right way for their customers and staff. So for your website, have you got a news section or somewhere prominent and easy for customers to get to put updated information? Signage. Do you have clear signage about your opening hours, about any changes to services or operations? Do you need some new signage about social distancing and cleaning measures? For social media, remember that these are engagement tools and you'll need to have someone available to check the responses and to check that outrage that we've discussed. This is where a set of Q&As on a website, for example, is handy because you can direct people via social media channels to the website. For staff information sessions, remember that these will need to change dramatically with social distancing measures now in place. Do you send an email and then allocate times for small groups of people to book in and ask questions rather than having an all-in staff process? Again, it's really worth taking the time to make sure that those people who matter most to you will receive the information across a number of channels to make it easier for them. The last channel I wanted to talk about was about media. And this is indeed one of those channels. This is one of those channels. However, it's not a channel that you can actually control the message as much as you can on your channels. There are many reasons as to why you would want to engage with media, and that's generally to tell your story. A media interview, for example, can help you communicate directly with your customers and stakeholders, be the credible source of truth, build your influence, and position you and your business in a particular way that works for you. As I mentioned though, while media may be a really loud and persistent voice, they should absolutely not be the first people you communicate with. If you do choose, however, to talk to media, a couple of things that we'd recommend. Be clear again on what you're really trying to achieve. It's your choice as to whether you want to communicate and engage with media. You're under no obligation. And if you don't feel comfortable to do so, then don't. And if it's not the right time for you, look at another time. And lastly, always be polite, regardless of what you're thinking, what you're feeling. If you're rude, then that will become the story and will do massive damage to your reputation. So I've been talking for a while now, and we've covered a fair bit of ground, but as Anna Butler said to begin with, we'll send out the presentation and the recording with you. So firstly, to wrap it up, I just wanted to go through our top 5 tips. Thank you for the new slide. Which we think covers everything. So the first one, as you can see there, is being human first will make a better business. Being human first will make sure that you have empathy. It means that you'll acknowledge those concerns that people are feeling, which helps to build trust. It means acknowledging your own to make sure that you're aware of how you're feeling. It means understanding that what you can guarantee and what you can't. It means that you'll understand how your communications will be received by staff and stakeholders because they're feeling some pressure as well. So be human first, and it'll make your business a much better one. The second one, and it's something I've said a lot, be clear on your purpose and prepare for more uncertainty. This will make it much easier for you to talk about your key messages and be clear on those. Know your facts, know what you don't know. Remember that with more outbreaks likely as we all re-emerge, and now with a recession, we don't know what else is coming, but we do know there's likely to be more change. So we need to plan for it and be prepared for it. The third one there, as you can see, is communicate what you know, when you know, to those who matter most to you. Be proactive, be open, be honest, be transparent, and communicate with stakeholders impacted first. This is about making you a really credible source of truth for your business and for your staff. The fourth one there, as we said, is listen and adapt. This means that you can stay agile, that you need to stay agile with your content, with your channels, and how you use them. Remember to listen and engage on all of your channels, and be prepared, particularly on social media, for that outrage. There's a lot of angst, and so it needs to go somewhere. Hopefully not in the direction of you, but you need to be prepared for it. Remember to review your current and planned communications and marketing materials as well. And the last one is about resources. Use the ones that are available to you and develop those you need. This is a new situation for everyone. So again, be really clear on government advice and use their resources, and make sure you have your own plans prepared and that you are familiar with those plans. You'll be expected to have those plans in place as well. Righto, so we've been doing all the talking for a while, but we're really keen to facilitate discussion and really hear some of your questions. So I might hand back to Anna Butler to run through some questions for us.
Great, thank you, Anna. We've had some awesome questions coming through as well, so please just keep them coming through the bottom panel of your screen in the Q&A section. Okay, I'll start with our first question. I might throw this one to you, Claire, as I'm sure this is something you've also been contemplating over the past few weeks. The question is, I own a professional service SME. How can I decide whether to promote my services to clients or just back off? I don't want to just wait or hope for clients to come to me, but I don't want to hassle people either at this time.
Thank you. Really good question, and thanks for the thorough explanation. Anna, as well, you covered an enormous amount of ground. I think the key for this at the moment, and someone accidentally referred to our business as Bastion Relationship Management the other day, which was actually kind of apt at the moment, because really the focus needs to be on developing relationships. And so if you're feeling like there's a contribution you can make, a way in which you can help and support your clients and potential customers out there as well, it's about not focusing on seeing this necessarily as a sales and marketing opportunity, which feels inauthentic or may feel like you're badgering people who are otherwise under a lot of pressure, and looking at how you can use this as an opportunity to contribute your knowledge, to build a relationship, to reach out, offering advice to them that may result in more business for you, and may result in an opportunity to have broader conversations. But right now it's really about looking at relationships, and relationships are based on trust. Relationships are based on a sense of reassurance and commitment and care. And it goes exactly to Anna's point that she made about being human first. We've seen a lot of businesses, big and small, really grappling with not only dealing with what's right in front of them in terms of the impacts on their own businesses, but looking and sometimes scrambling for how then to respond elsewhere. And it really goes to that point around making sure the decisions that you're making are not being influenced by your own sense of anxiety about cash flow or being able to hit key targets and wanting to look at new product development, but taking a step back, taking a breath and thinking, how is this an opportunity for me to reinforce and build better relationships going forward, because as in most crises, it's not necessarily the crisis itself that will define you. It's how you respond to that. And so we've seen a lot of organisations actually picking up the phone, offering to have conversations, literally just checking in to say, how you're going. Sitting back and waiting. At the moment, a lot of people and small business owners and people within organisations, our own clients, don't necessarily know what they don't know, to use a Rumsfeldism, and so they don't know to go and ask for help at a particular time because they're not actually sure what's out there because their head is down. So there's nothing stopping you from reaching out and offering a helping hand and making suggestions to them, but doing so in a way that's genuinely rooted in wanting to build a better relationship with those people.
And Claire, to that, I might add just to that is I think in this world where we've been confined to our homes and so many more of us are working from home, I think there is probably, we do know so many more details about each other, about our colleagues and our clients. So there is often actually an easier way in to start having that personal conversation now, whether that's through the children who appear on screen or that you hear in the background, or the partner who's running past and didn't realise that you were on a call. So I think there's, and sometimes you're in people's bedrooms without realising it as well. So I think there's that aspect of building that relationship is actually a little bit easier now because you're in your home, and for a lot of part they're in theirs as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Anna. And we've actually had clients who have communicated to us that they've actually felt like a lot of the normal silos that exist within their organisations because of normal department structures have actually completely broken down for the better of the organisation. So if you're running an SME or if you've got clients, there's actually opportunities to leverage that as well and offer your services on. Does that mean that there's a change in structure or ways of working that can be carried on beyond COVID into what a return to a COVIDsafe or a new normal looks like on the other side of this?
Great, thanks. Great answers. Okay, next question. I'll get Anna, you to respond to this one first. You talked about the long and challenging road ahead. So how do we get the balance right between wanting to keep employees motivated and reassured while not wanting to give them false hope that everything will be okay?
Yeah, really, really great question. And I think first and foremost, you need to recognise that you probably won't always get it right, and that's okay. That's why that trust that you build with your employees is really, really important, because they will be much more forgiving, just like you will be much more forgiving. But in direct response to your question, I would say keep talking to your staff. So you can read the room and understand how they're feeling and when they will need a little bit extra motivation, and when they need some reassurance. As I said, it's a balance. You won't always get it right, but really understanding them and listening to them and hearing them will help you to strike that balance between reassurance and motivation, while also making sure that from a commercial aspect, your business is getting what it needs from your staff.
Great, thank you. I might throw this one to both of you, but maybe start with you, Claire, to let you catch your breath, Anna. So the question is, we are very aware that the virus thrives in groups, and sport is all about bringing groups together. With community sport, and particularly indoor sport, preparing to recommence operations or already operating under strict guidelines, what would be your advice to sporting organisations to manage communications to their members?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we are naturally inclined to want to get together for sport. I think we're all missing it, and it's suddenly randomly NRL fans because we've been craving getting back to sport, and it's a really important part of feeling that sense of community connection and confidence as well, particularly in a recession. I think small businesses, there's a lot that community sporting clubs can learn from other SMEs as well. I think SMEs have done an incredible job of adapting to and using social media to be able to communicate regularly with their clients and their customers throughout this time, and have been able to do so in really creative and interesting ways. It doesn't just have to be a kind of a staid boring safety message. It can actually be really engaging, and we've seen, particularly in the hospitality sector, a lot of cafes and restaurants do that in fun ways that have actually built trust and engagement. And I think there's a lot that the community sporting sector can learn from that as well. So to Anna's point around channels, really understanding and taking some time to think about your channels, but also mapping your stakeholders as well. So community clubs, there are a lot of volunteers and a lot of parents and a lot of other kind of third parties beyond those who are directly getting onto the netball courts, getting out onto the footy fields on the weekend as well. So building out that plan and really thinking, being quite considered about what channels are going to best hit those people, and creating that regular drumbeat of communications. And it might be some videos, they don't have to be high production, but just putting together really simple updates from the coaches, welcoming people back, but reiterating the safety message as well, which is particularly important for parents as well, who are sending kids back, wanting to know what they can and can't do, but also when you're looking at going up into the more senior and into the elite sports as well, it's that reassurance that you're looking for, and that confidence and level of certainty. So thinking about your channels, thinking about who those impacted and influencers are, and taking the time to map that out is really important. And looking at adapting your channels, socials are a really important aspect. So if your Facebook page is halfway finished, take the time to actually get that up and running and using that effectively, because people are reaching out and using social media to find information.
And I might just add to that and sound like a cracked record and just say you can ask them as well. So once you've started that engagement, don't be afraid to ask what people want to see, because that in itself will be an engagement to get people talking and get that sense of community happening, even though it's not a physical one as such.
Great, thank you. Anna, I might just stay with you for this next question.
Sure.
You said there's no such thing as over-communicating. How regularly should you be communicating with your team so that you're not spamming them?
Yeah, good question. And I'm probably not going to be very helpful and give you a definitive answer, because it really does depend on how they're feeling and what concerns they have. And again, as I said, it's really about keeping that information relevant and pertinent. So what you want to be able to build up in that by being proactive and leading with communications is an attitude from your staff that when there's something important they need to know, that you will tell them, so that they don't feel they need to come asking you about what's happening, that they're confident that you are across things, and that when they need to know something that you will tell them. So again, I'm not going to be able to give you a specific answer, because it really does depend. It depends on what changes are happening, particularly to your industry, whether it's in your state. So for example, there might be a change in one state that doesn't change in another, that may need clarifying. So get a drumbeat going and see how people are feeling, but make sure always that the information that you give them is relevant and pertinent, and that will build that trust. And again, listen to them. I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you.
Just add to that as well, that drumbeat is probably the most critical thing, and whether that's weekly or fortnightly or however long that needs to be, but then thinking about, and often the way we talk about it with clients is defining what sort of content you need to communicate, and therefore what sort of communications needs to follow that. So if you have big milestones coming up that are about reopening or playing again, or a big change that needs to happen in your organisation, think ahead to how do you need to plan for and prepare people, so what communications is needed for that. And we consider those kind of big marquee moments or big milestones. That drumbeat is your opportunity to just ensure that you are that regular credible source of truth, getting your brilliant basics right, so getting your templates and the way in which you communicate ready to go should you need to deploy information out of sequence, and then just keeping a really close eye on what some of the issues and risks are that might be bubbling up that might require you to turn around something quite quickly. I think if you consider the content and consider the substance and need, that will determine then the timing, and your staff and customers, to Anna's point, will respond to that in the right way, as opposed to you feeling like you get onto that autopilot of just wanting to constantly communicate out, because you can actually become a bit tone deaf to what people are wanting and needing to hear from you.
Great, thank you. I might throw this one to both of you and maybe start with you, Claire. If you do have an outbreak, how do you stop people linking it to your brand?
Well, it's a good question, and probably if your sole purpose is to want to not link it to your brand, then you're potentially coming at it from the wrong starting point, because that can be seen over time as being evasive or trying to hide critical information. So having a really clear plan in place on what you need to communicate, who you need to communicate it to, and having sort of templates in place ready to go. And we've developed a range of these that we can talk to you about in a moment. But what needs to be linked to your brand is not necessarily the fact that you have a cluster or a series of confirmed cases, but the way in which you're dealing with it. That's what you want linked to your brand. You want people to have confidence that that this has occurred, that you know what's happened, that you're in control of the situation, you're working really closely with government, following government guidelines, but that you've got all of those plans and tools in place. If your starting point is to divorce your brand from the incident itself, then potentially that's going to feel disingenuous, and you'll potentially lose a bit of trust in that engagement. So it's inevitable that we will have an increase in confirmed cases and community transmission as we start to pull out of this, and a lot of the chief health officers have talked about that and preparing us for that. So the more organisations, particularly SMEs, can be prepared and have those plans in place, and we've worked on quite detailed plans that are literally a checklist of every single type of communication, including the letters that need to go to close contacts and casual contacts, as well as to support the contact tracing. The more that you can have that plan in place, the more you can reassure people, so the less it matters whether that particular incident is connected to your brand or not. Anna, did you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think probably I'd add, and Claire, you've actually said it before, that it's not necessarily about the issue itself, but it's how you manage that, and be defined by how you manage it rather than the issue itself. There will be more clusters and more outbreaks. I think a way to highlight that is, think of the last time you had some terrible customer service. What do you remember most out of that? Is it the fact that there was terrible customer service to begin with, or the fact that they managed it appallingly afterwards, or that they managed it extremely well? You remember those ones that they managed extremely well. It will feel really counterintuitive to step into something and say, actually, yes, this was us, and manage it appropriately. The first thing, and the question leads to you wanting to step back away from it. But if you step into it, you have a much better chance of controlling it and managing it really well, rather than it managing you and defining your business.
Great, thank you. I'm just conscious of time, so I might just ask a couple more, and then we'll start to wrap up. And if we don't get to your question today as well, we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. Just on a similar tangent, I suppose, talking about COVID, this question is, if I get a positive COVID test, will the government step in and manage this for me?
So there's two parts to that answer. Firstly, yes, the government has a number of protocols in place, and health departments in different states have really robust ways of measuring this, and we've been working on with a number of clients who have had confirmed cases, who are working incredibly closely. The issue, though, is not actually being complacent or expecting that will happen necessarily immediately. Contact tracing is actually quite a detailed and complex process. And so the more that you can do to prepare for that, have your own sets of communications ready to go that are in line with and point to the government work that you're doing. But what you definitely can't do is assume that you can stand back and the government will step in and work directly with you and your organisation, particularly as we anticipate that the number of confirmed cases will start to go up again. So you need to be seen as not only partnering with government and working absolutely hand in glove with them, but reassuring those who matter to your brand that you're doing everything on their behalf to ensure their safety and to demonstrate that you have this under control. The last thing you want, and we've seen a couple of instances of facilities that have come out and said we didn't say anything because the government was dealing with it, and ultimately that actually erodes trust in your brand. So there is a lot within that you can control, and we've developed some tools based on the work that we've done in the past to eliminate the panic and anxiety and concern and sort of rush that happens and the stress when you do find out that you have a confirmed case, that allows you to systematically work through that in a really methodical and considered way, and that actually gives all of the people who matter to you confidence, but equally give the government confidence that you actually have it under control as well. Anna, I don't know if you wanted to add to that too.
No, I think that's a fairly comprehensive answer.
Okay, so our last question is, I think it's a follow-up to an earlier question as well. So I'm thinking about going out and asking some clients or potential clients what they need or would like right now. Is that an okay thing to do? I don't want to assume I know what they want, but I don't want to take up their time with research if it's going to be an inconvenience for them.
I can give a very short answer and then perhaps go to Anna, because I think Anna's covered it off beautifully in saying you actually need to engage, and it's a good thing to engage. I think people assume research is a means to an end, and the data at the end of it is the piece that's the most important bit. But we see research as actually a form of engagement in its own right. So if you think about the answer before in terms of developing that relationship, if you focus on it being an opportunity to develop a closer relationship with your clients, then it's not just using them as focus group to develop a data set for yourself and your own purposes. It's actually of value to them as well.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And I think to that point, I'd absolutely start that engagement with how are you? How have you been faring? How is your family? How is your staff? How is your business going? And that in itself, as Claire said, is engagement and research. So it's not just about the engagement of what you need out of it. It's what they can get out of it as well. And what they can get out of it is that you actually care and concern for them personally and their business. So two parts. There's the yes, engage, but also make sure that you're engaging with some empathy as a human first, and on a human level, and then the rest will naturally come. If you make a call and they don't answer, you leave a message that essentially says, hi, I just wanted to touch base, see how you are, see how you're going, would love to hear from you if you've got a chance, but it's not urgent. So you just let them know that you're just checking in. And do you know what? If someone's having a bad day and just wants a nice phone call, that's probably a really nice message for them to get, and they're more inclined to pick up the phone and have a general chat with you. So again, it's just like it wasn't necessarily a sell of your services. It's not necessarily research. This is about being a human first.
Great, thanks guys, great answers. We did have a few questions that we have run out of time to answer, but I'll certainly follow up afterwards to make sure that we do get those answered. So I think all that's left, I think Claire, you were just going to cover off some of the other support that we do have available.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining again. We've been really excited to deliver this today, but also really grateful for you taking your time over your lunch break in what is an otherwise really busy and chaotic time. So thank you very much. Just quickly touching on, we've talked about the toolkit and the tools that we've developed based on all of the lessons we've learnt. So those critical checklists, those baseline shell media templates and staff letters and contact tracing letters as well, that effectively eliminate a lot of that stress so that it does free you up when you are dealing with changing, uncertain or highly stressful circumstances within your organisation as you start this recovery and reopening process, so that you can focus on those big strategic decisions that you need to make and do so objectively without the added stress of trying to figure out how to suddenly become a communications expert at the same time. So we've developed this toolkit. You can find out more information about it on our website. The other thing we've been doing a lot of work with is training. So a lot of small and medium enterprises don't have significant resources in-house to manage strategic communications separate to marketing and sales. So what we're doing is working a lot with in-house communications teams to help build their capabilities, but also with business leaders to help them better present, to be able to deliver messages with confidence, whether that's in the media or through Zoom, or to staff as well through videos and other forms of communication. So we're doing a lot of training work. And lastly, core to what we do is deliver advice and strategic counsel. And we know that sometimes organisations like ours can be cost prohibitive for small and medium enterprises. So we're looking at different models where you can actually buy smaller batches of time with us, or literally just pick up the phone and ask a question without feeling an obligation to sign on to a major piece of work. So we're looking at how we can adapt our own service to ensure that SMEs are actually able to access really comprehensive expert advice that's needed as and when they need it.
Great, thanks Claire. Okay, I think all that's left now is just again to say a big thank you to everyone for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank Claire and Anna for your amazing insights today as well. Please feel free to reach out and get in touch if you do want to chat about anything that was discussed today any further, or if you've just got a question or need some further help. And yeah, we will be sharing a recording of the webinar with you all afterwards, and I can follow up on the unanswered questions as well. But thanks again, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks Anna.